Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Military Money Manual podcast. I'm your host, Spencer, joined by my co-host, Jamie from militarymoneymanual.com. Today on the podcast, we have Justin Peters. Justin is the host of the FI-Minded, that's F-I-Minded podcast, a podcast for people on the journey to financial independence who want to have fun along the way. His own journey towards FI started after reading I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. And growing up, his dad taught him the basics of budgeting, saving, and being intentional with money long before he ever heard the term FI. And like many others, Justin followed the traditional hustle path until it led to burnout. In 2020, he hit pause and took a 7-month sabbatical. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, about taking mini retirements. And that became the catalyst for his starting the FI-Minded podcast. And what began as a passion project during the career break turned into a long-term creative outlet. Justin shares his wins and missteps, including the $13,000 mistake of hiring a financial advisor on his podcast. He's got interviews with fellow FI-minded individuals, solo episodes about lifestyle design, burnout, and money mindset, and his goal is to inspire listeners to stop waiting and start building a life they actually enjoy. We had a great conversation with Justin, and without further ado, we'll take it away. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to join you guys. I feel like this has been a long time coming.
We get to work together. So for the audience, Justin is part of our team of editors behind the scenes that helps make Jamie and me sound and look so good on the podcast. And I wanted to start with a story that we were talking about before we hit record, which was you were saying that you started going part-time with your job, and the less you're doing your job, the more you like it. So I'll just leave that for you to start with.
Yeah, funny how that works out. Honestly, I feel like a lot of people fall into this trap, and it actually, whenever I was in the midst of my kind of like career crisis, I was working, I was really burnt out. I didn't love what I was doing. I took a mini sabbatical, which I know we're going to talk about. And then I re-entered the workforce and picked up right where I started after my sabbatical, and I was working full time. And I almost like quickly got back to the place where I was like, feeling a little burnt out again. This is not overly exciting. And I thought I just needed honestly quit working or do something different. But what I found out was I really just needed to work a little bit less. And it's funny how that works. We'll talk a lot about financial independence, but that gives you the option to work a little bit less. And I've found that most people in the FI community don't necessarily want to quit working, but they just want to define work by their own parameters. And most people still enjoy working, at least in some kind of part-time capacity. And I'm still working for an employer that I've been on and off working for 12, 13 years now, in that part-time capacity on projects that I'm really excited about. And I get to kind of say no to a lot of the other tasks and responsibilities that weren't exciting me anymore. So it's been really great. And I actually don't really see myself pulling away from work anytime soon, although I'm nearing CoastFi.
Justin, you mentioned a mini sabbatical. I think that might be an unfamiliar term to people, but I meet a lot of people that are like, I don't want to retire early. So can you explain exactly how you decided to do that, what it is, and how you prepared for that?
Yeah, like I was mentioning, I was in a bit of a career crisis at the time. I was made a quick jump from one employer to another, thinking that was going to be the solution. I was kind of in the same industry, but a smaller organization. And I found out not only was not the solution, but I actually liked that job even less. And so here I was in my office, probably about 3 weeks into the job, just announced it on LinkedIn, did the whole big shabam, I'm getting a new job, all of this. And of course it was like a sales role too. So I was outbound, reaching out to people, telling people about my new role. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, dude, this is not it. This sucks. I really don't want to do this either. And it took me about another 3 months before I started creating conversation around this. I was talking to somebody and I was like, yeah, I'm trying to hit the 1 year mark so I can move on from this company and not have this career blemish on my resume. And he's like, you're going to spend the next 9 months of your life hating your career and your job just to hit this quote, self-induced 1 year mark so you don't have a blemish on your resume. I was like, now that you say it that way, that is definitely a terrible idea. But I'm like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, Justin, we just got done talking about this money that you saved up, making this transition from St. Louis to San Diego. He's like, why don't you just take that money that you didn't spend and create a sabbatical for yourself? And that was the very first time that idea came to my mind. And I was like, wow, especially as somebody that's been working pretty much as I could, weekends, summer breaks, etc., since I was 14 years old, coming from a Midwest hardworking background, taking a sabbatical, taking time off of work in my mid-20s, sounded like a crazy idea to me. But I sat on it for a little bit longer and actually pulled the trigger about a month and a half later. Ended up creating what was going to be a 6-month. It actually ended up being a 7-month sabbatical for myself. Took some time off of work and actually didn't go back to that employer, completely quit, and then re-enter the workforce doing something entirely different. But looking back on that now, that was the best decision that I ever made in my whole life. And it was crazy. It did so much for my career, even post the sabbatical, and refreshed me, and honestly didn't really set me that far back in terms of monetary.
Yes, let's talk about the monetary, the logistics of it. Did you move like some of your stock portfolio to cash and then just draw down, like give yourself a paycheck every month essentially?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I moved from St. Louis to San Diego, and I kind of built this nest egg over there thinking I was going to spend a lot of money making that transition. I thought I was going to lose my job. And whenever I went to my employer and let them know that I was moving and I was going to put in my resignation, they asked, whoa, would you be open to working remote? And at that time, very few people were working remote. We had one person in the company that was working remote. So I didn't even think about that as an option, but I was like, sure. I think that would be really good. One thing that didn't change my life, as I'm moving, changing, housing, friends, etc., keeping my career, my job would be great. So I had this like pile of money that I didn't actually end up using. The move cost less than I thought it was. I didn't lose my job. I actually kept it and was making some more. I had a pile of money kind of set aside that I didn't end up using, probably about $20,000. And at that point in time, my life was costing me about probably $35,000 to $40,000 a year. So I built about $25,000 or $20,000, set that aside, thinking I was going to use that in my sabbatical. And honestly, we can talk these numbers too. I didn't hardly even touch any of the money because a lot of serendipity happened.
Wow.
That's really neat. I think a lot of people are probably asking other logistics and practical questions like healthcare, or like, what'd you do for insurance? And did you have a job lined up afterwards? But I think that this option might be really good for military service members, or maybe even spouses who are moving to a new spot, or they have a quick assignment where they know they're only going to be there a year. As they separate or retire from the military, a lot of times there's this pressure to find the perfect job at the perfect location right away. And just maybe introducing this as an option, if we can get all the logistics and ducks in a row here, might be a really neat thing.
I've been diving into mini retirements even more recently. Someone named Jillian Johnsred has a ton of content around mini retirements, and I find it super fascinating. I'm probably someone that's got to take a mini retirement at least once a decade, setting aside a half a year to year to pursue something else. And I don't even think it needs to be recovering from burnout from your career, but maybe you really want to spend some time or energy working on a hobby that's always interested you, but you've never had time. Maybe you do want to do some traveling that is not going to fit into a weekend schedule or like a long extended week-long vacation. Like there are a lot of other reasons that I think you could potentially want a mini retirement, but I do think it's great. And some of these can be built in kind of intentionally into your plan. And sometimes it might be unintentional. And you can turn what could be a crappy situation like getting laid off or transition in between jobs as an opportunity to maybe build a mini retirement for yourself.
Is there a difference between a mini retirement and a sabbatical? Like sabbaticals are I'm taking a break and coming back to the same job, or are those kind of synonymous terms?
Terminology, I think, might be important there. Yeah, I think sabbaticals traditionally, like you're thinking like education, where professors are given like every 7 years, they're given a semester off to go and pursue like a educational path or something. That's like where the term actually came from. I'm using it interchangeably, sabbatical, mini retirement. I think mini retirement just sounds more fun in all honesty. So I've been trying to call it mini retirements more than sabbaticals now.
Okay. Yeah, I like it a lot. And, I'm thinking about, I've been in the military over 16 years. So at some point in the next decade, probably 4 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, my time will end. And I know that a lot of people, my peer group, will get out, they'll go work as a consultant or a defense contractor, or come back and work for the federal government as a civilian employee. I think this is really attractive of just taking some time to explore hobbies, see what I like, reconnect with friends, reconnect with family, test out areas where I might want to live without fully committing and diving into that.
I think the idea that resume gaps matter in this economy anymore. Look at military spouses, for instance. I mean, they're moving so often, they're lucky if they can get a job wherever they move. And then when they come back, the workforce is usually happy to have them come back in roles that they were doing, 5 or 10 years before, or in different roles, if they've done the training or they want to try something new. And that's a cohort of the population that's always had to be flexible with their careers and has always had quote unquote gaps in the resume. But the whole idea of like gaps in the resume, I mean, come on, it's 2025. Like I would think most employers are going to be quite happy to see, they're like, oh, what did you do for this year? And you're like, oh, I took care of my mental health. I went hiking. I spent time with my mom who was sick. And, I built a cabin in the woods. They'd be like, wow, that's awesome. Tell me more about that. Because I want to hire that kind of person.
Yeah, I think that is somewhat strategic too. If you are going to exit the workforce, probably not come back to your employer, but then look for a job afterwards. Part of even my strategy whenever I took a sabbatical was, what was the story I was going to tell whenever I rejoined the workforce? Like, what was I going to tell a recruiter that they would view this time that I took off as something that was really meaningful and important? And for me, that was podcasting. I actually started a podcast the first week that I started my sabbatical. It was a project that I've always wanted to do. I fell in love with the medium. I loved podcasting. And I said I was going to podcast. So I bought 2 Yeti microphones, ordered them, put them up on my shelf. And it was like, cool, I'm going to get started on my podcast. And there they sat for 8 months collecting dust until I took the sabbatical and I quit my job. I called my best friend on my way home and was like, hey man, you want to be the first guest on my podcast? And I swear I did more in those 6 days between calling him and prepping for that first interview than I did in those last 8 months. That was my story whenever I re-entered the workforce, when people were asking me what was I doing. And I said I was taking some time off. I went back and spent time with family, but I also really wanted to invest in this project that I'm really excited to tell you about. And I would go on to share a little bit about the podcast, and people were very, very receptive to it.
Speaking of your podcasting, I think a lot of military families are interested in how they can do a hobby and turn it into a side hustle, making extra income. So now you're not only do you podcast, you help coach and edit other podcasts and get them up and running. How did you take something from, I'm interested in podcasting and I'm going to buy mics and they're going to sit on my shelf for 8 months, to now where you work more on podcasting and consulting for podcasts than you do in your regular job? Because I think that'll really resonate.
Yeah, Jamie, I really wish I could tell you it was like a strategic path for me. But honestly, there was a lot of serendipity along the way. So yeah, I started the podcast. I honestly thought I was going to quit podcasting whenever I re-entered the workforce. I thought it was going to be a 6-month hobby for me because I'm way too type A to do absolutely nothing. But I was having so much fun podcasting that I doubled down on it even whenever I re-entered the workforce, and was like always looking for more time to spend on my show. But I never really thought about like extending it anything further than that. And I was making a little bit of money through affiliate marketing and sponsorships on my show, but I never really took it seriously as a business. And then one day my brother called me. You guys both know my brother, Kyle. He comes from a music production background, and he's like, dude, love your show, love the content. I listen to every single episode, but it is painfully bad in terms of audio quality. Can I please help you? And I was like, yes, Kyle. Like, I loved everything about podcasting except for the audio engineering and editing. Like, anytime something would go wrong and I had to go to YouTube University to figure out how to make this solution, I hated it. But I loved marketing the show, growing the show, creating the content, all of that. So he came on, we were like a match made in heaven. He started having his own career crisis, and he's like, I think I'm just gonna quit my job and freelance podcast edit. He'd been working on my show for about 2 months. He's like, would you help me find some clients? And I was like, I'd love that. And I started calling some friends, and I had a lot of friends in the podcasting space, being a podcaster for 2 years, especially out of that 2021 boom of like all these business owners that were stuck at home. Like, I need to start a podcast because that was like what everybody was doing then. So I just started calling them up, and I had so much fun helping my brother kind of grow his freelance business that I eventually went to him and I was like, dude, can we just build this together? And here we are, like, 3-4 years later.
Justin, when you're talking about turning that passion, that interest in podcasting into a business, and I'll just tell the story quickly about how we met FinCon a few years ago. And I think Spencer slept in from the morning run, and I went for a run, running next to Justin a little bit. We're talking, what do you do? What do you, going back and forth? And, I'm, starting this podcast consulting and editing. And I was like, well, we have a podcast and we hate editing. And so then I texted Spencer like, hey, you got to meet Justin. 2:00 that day, we met up. And the rest is history. So sometimes military families, people in a transition phase, spouses, like, it's hard when we move to a new spot. It's hard when you're not sure what's coming next, but it's just an example of how, like, putting yourself out there. You went to an event, you were outgoing, you talked, you introduced yourself, I think is how it started. And the next thing you know, like, friends, business partners, your side hustle turned business continues to grow.
You honestly just need to call it out and start labeling yourself. Like, if you want to get into something, like, you can just, hey, I'm a podcast editor. And I just started telling a bunch of people that, and the opportunities just started opening up. Now I get referrals all the time from friends, colleagues, different people, because they know I'm the podcast guy, and people want to help you. and want to see you grow, but they don't know how to do that if they don't know what your goals are. So if you're out there and you want to start a jewelry store and you're looking to sell that jewelry, start telling people that you make jewelry and that you can do custom orders, and go out there and share that with people, and you'll be surprised how many people support you.
Let's talk about financial independence. So that's the name of your show now, the FI Minded, Financial Independence Minded. And that was a pivot from you. So you went from The Struggle is Real, which I thought was a great title, by the way. Let's talk. One of the questions we get a lot is like, on your journey to financial independence, there's kind of that initial excitement where you discover Mr. Money Mustache and you read all these things and you're like, wait, I can retire in 15 years? And it's like, yeah, it's just math. It's just savings rate. And you're like, holy cow. And then you like, honey, we're cutting the budget. You're going back to work. The kids are dropping. We're going to homeschool the kids. You know, we're going to sell our car. We're going to get rid of our debt. And there's that kind of initial excitement. And then there's the goal at the end, right? Where it's like, we're going to have $2 million and it's going to be amazing. But then there's that boring middle where kind of you've figured everything out. You've automated all your investing. You're just throwing it into like a 3-fund Bogleheads portfolio. You got your TSP going and it's all set up. And you're like, what do I do now? And I always tell people like, that's great. Like you automated everything. Like go live your life. Go do the fun stuff. So how do you make sure that on like your personal journey to financial independence that it's not boring? And what do you say to others who find themselves getting bored?
I think that's a really good call out, because I think this is really challenging. And I think a lot of us in the FI community fall into this trap where we ride that initial wave of excitement for a couple of years. And it's so fun doing the optimization and continuing to work on something. And then you do eventually kind of run out of things and you're just in the holding or the waiting game at some point in time. And you're like, ugh. And then you might get caught in situations like I did, where I'm like continuing to work at a job that doesn't excite me whatsoever. And what I wish I would have done there, and what I now do, is I really try, even though I'm not completely financially independent, to live like I would be financially independent. And I think a lot of people forget that financial independence, or the journey to financial independence, is a 2-part strategy. The first part is accumulating wealth to create options. Because at the end of the day, money is just one of the barriers that we have to solve to kind of create the options that we really want to build our life around. But then the second piece to that is really using that optionality to improve your life. And what I think a lot of us in the FI community get caught up in is that we think that this is a sequential strategy, meaning we have to accumulate all the wealth to get the options, and then we can use that optionality to start improving our life, where it doesn't need to be. These things can actually happen in duality, where as we're gaining more or accumulating more wealth, we can also start to utilize that optionality to improve our own life. So something that I did was pull back and start working less, like working more part-time. Although I'm not completely financially independent, and I'm probably slowing my path to financial independence down, like the nice thing is I'm not running away from a job or career anymore. Like I'm like, this is awesome. This is great. So just like thinking through different parts of my life and realizing how can I improve those specific parts right now, and kind of giving that kind of post-FI mindset into a lot of that lens has been great for me. So now I like look at my income and what's happening, and I'm like, I don't need to like let go of any of the income that I'm making right now, because it's actually really fun to make all that income. Like I really love running this podcast production company with my brother. I like the part-time work that I'm doing with the company that I'm working for right now, which is like odd, but I'm like, I almost see myself as financially independent right now, because that income is paying my current bills, and I have this like nest egg that's naturally growing over time too. So it's like a interesting conundrum to be in. But I think like if you work the strategy in duality versus waiting to actually start improving your life, like you're going to put together a really great life.
That's awesome. It reminds me a lot of there's a famous Reddit post about building the life you want and then saving for it. But what you were just describing there kind of sounds like you start saving for the life you want, then you build the life you want, then you go back to saving for the life you want, then you keep building the life. And it's this yin and yang. And I really like how you start using your optionality to actually like capitalize on it. You actually like take some of the options that are presented to you. It also reminds me of, Charlie Munger's talking about the first 100,000 is the hardest, right? Once you kind of get over those initial barriers, especially if you don't hate your job and you're okay working a little bit longer and saving along the way, if everything's automated, then just like you can just go and enjoy your life, and you don't have to be financially independent to enjoy your life. And I think what happened was, in the early, maybe or 2000s, 2010s, is we just had like all these software engineers that just hated their jobs, and they were saving super aggressively and they were being paid, very well. And then they quit and they didn't want to do anything. And that's kind of where the FIRE movement started. But I think for the rest of us out there that maybe enjoy our jobs or want to enjoy our jobs or want to do good work in the world, it's more important to have a balance where we're not saving so aggressively that we're not enjoying our life, and we're also not spending so much that we're never going to be financially independent.
That's why the kind of the sub movements of like CoastFi and SlowFi have become very popular over the last 5 years, because a lot of the FI community is starting to get that wisdom from a lot of the early people that were FIing and realizing and giving us the feedback back that it's like, hey, I kind of wish I didn't sprint to the finish line. I wish I would have just like leisurely jogged through the park and enjoyed some things a little bit differently versus, taking that job that I'm making $120,000 as a terrible software engineer, going to work in a silly example, but like in a bakery or something, making $50,000 a year and still being able to save a little bit, but, extending my FI timeline. Like, once again, if you're really enjoying your life and the income that you're getting from your life right now is paying for everything, well, you're actually kind of financially independent right now then, like in all actuality. And I think it's interesting, but you can pull these different levers at different times. And I also remind people that even with like my sabbatical, why wait until 15 years from now, whenever I completely FI, to then start utilizing all these retirement years when I could pluck a year off in the back end and use it right now because I'm feeling burnt out, or I want to go pursue something else, or I want to build a business. And then I just work an extra year, an extra 2 years down the road. Like, there's no reason that you need to front load the 15 years right away and then enjoy the last 40 years. You can enjoy a year now and then go hard at it for 2 years. Like, you can dial things up and down whenever it comes to savings rates over time and enjoy the whole process along the way. But you have to experiment with the optionality to really figure out what makes sense for you right now.
A lot of people are, if they fall into black and white thinking traps like I do sometimes, they'll be like, well, this is the prescription. I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and then I will have options. And I think this is going to be really challenging to that mindset and that thinking trap of, I will be happy, I will explore, I will do hobbies, I will spend time, I will travel or whatever when I retire or when I get $1 million or when I'm fully financially independent. And what we're encouraging them to do, and with your example, is pull that mindset and that the mindset of freedom earlier instead of waiting for a number. But if someone's confused, you mentioned SlowFi and CoastFi, there's some other options out there other than being 25 times my annual expenses. Can you kind of explain what those other options might be?
The 25X is still kind of the core principle to financial independence. SlowFi, CoastFi are really just flavors of financial independence. CoastFi is essentially like, you have enough money that if you never invested another dollar, you would still reach financial independence by traditional retirement age, or really whatever age that you set. So like, I could plug the numbers into a calculator right now. I'm about 70% of the way to my quote financial independence number right now. And I plug the numbers in frequently, like every quarter. I'm like, where am I at? And it's like, you have 7 years if I don't invest anything else, or if I keep investing at the same rate, I have 4 years. So like, I know I'm probably hitting that somewhere between 4 and 7 years, and I can completely take the money that I'm using to save and invest right now and re-inject that into travel or fun or hobbies or taking time off of work from making monetary income. Or I can continue the path and continue to invest if I'm really enjoying things on the career front too. So I think it just gives you a little bit more option. And the nice thing is, I think we're all humans and we don't want to live the same rigid life day after day after day. And there are moments across the last 8-10 years of my financial independence journey that I've been really excited about growing my wealth, about investing and saving. And that's great. And I'll ride that wave. And then there are moments when I'm like, man, 3 years ago, I loved this job, but now I'm really hating this job. And sometimes it's the same job, but I've like grown as a person and maybe I have different interests, or my girlfriend lost her job and she wants to travel more. So I want to like take that opportunity to do something a little bit different at that moment. And the nice thing is I can pull back and not necessarily have to think about it too much because of all the wealth that I built now. And I can deploy some of that income that I've saved over this time so I can take that option and do a little bit less in this moment.
For our military listeners, you're probably like, yeah, that's great for you civilians because you don't have contracts that if you stop working, they throw you in jail. But actually, there are quite a few programs that are available to active duty military service members. So the Career Intermission Program is one of them. And this allows you to take, I think, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's up to 36 months now, right? 3 years?
That's for Air Force. I'm not sure if it's different by branch, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you can take 1 to 3 years off from the service, and then you incur a service commitment on the other side for the equivalent time that you left. And you still have a military ID, and you're still getting, I think, like 2 days or 3 days of pay or something.
You get a very small amount of pay, but you keep your health care benefits.
There are options out there. And that's, it's a great tool if like, 6 weeks maternity leave now, if you want to take more than that, or you want some paternity leave. Yeah. So there's some good options there on the military side. And if you've been saving and investing along the way, then maybe you say, look, we're just going to, our lifestyle costs $50,000 a year. We're going to withdraw $50,000, or we're going to stop reinvesting dividends, right? And we'll withdraw some dividends this year. There's lots of options. Or you could say, look, I'm going to take a career intermission program in a year or two. We're going to set some cash aside into a CD, and then it's going to be there when we take the program, and we won't even have to change our lifestyle. So there are options on the military side. Guard and Reserve is another good one, where if you're done with your contract, but you want to stay connected to the military, go Guard or Reserve. And then, if you get the fire bug and you're like, man, I need to make some more money, you can go back on active duty orders. There's a lot of opportunities for that, both in the Army and the Air National Guard.
Justin, do you consider yourself an optimizer?
I do, honestly.
Okay, so how did you balance the math behind this? Like, you had to have had a spreadsheet that says, I'm crushing my goals by like X%, I'm degrading it by this, because I think a lot of people that are listening to hours of financial podcasts each month are probably optimizers, and they might be thinking, but the math, it doesn't math.
It doesn't math. And honestly, Jamie, I don't know if I have a great answer for you, because there are moments when I'm like, oh my gosh, like even when I was moving down to part-time work, I'm like, but if I just like held this level of work right now and continued to make this, then I could just quit this job entirely a year and a half earlier. Like in my brain, it was hurting a lot, but I continue to invest into the content and this community. And a lot of people were giving me advice around like, slow down, like take some time off, like you have more options than you think. And I tried to lean into that and really press myself on that. It took me a while. Pulling back, making less, never felt good. I still haven't pulled the trigger of having to sell any assets yet. I know that is going to be a huge challenge at some point in time for me as well. But I don't know if I have an easy solution for you outside the fact that like you got to move on from making money and optimizing your wealth and start living life outside of that too.
Yeah, one, I think, psychological benefit that people might not be considering of a mini retirement is, and I see this in my dad, hey dad, and in his friends, is they're getting to, traditional retirement age of 65, 66. And they're like, what am I going to do all day? And like most of their ideas are like, go back to work, do some other job. And I just want to grab them and be like, do you have anything else you're interested in? Like, is there anything that you would rather be doing than showing up to produce income and pay taxes? And a lot of times the answer is no. And so I think if you took those mini retirements along the way, or at least you think about like, what would I do if I didn't show up for a 9 to 5? That empowers you to be able, when you reach a traditional retirement age or you reach an early financial independence number and you think, okay, I'm going to, take some time off from work, you can at least kind of start that process of figuring out like, what do I want to do with my time? Who do I want to be when I grow up? And for veterans, even if we don't earn a military pension, we might earn enough from our VA disability that can cover our expenses for a couple months or a couple years, and plus our savings. And so you might find yourself in a situation that a lot of veterans do, which is you start a job right when you get out of the military, and you quit that job after a couple weeks or a couple months. And then you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I actually want to do with my time? So I guess there's no question there other than, what do you think about like the psychological benefits of the mini retirement?
I should have said that, because I think that was the biggest turning point in all of this. Like taking that 7 months off and recognizing there's a life outside of producing income, like you mentioned, was mind-blowing to me. And it gave me a glimpse into like what full retirement could actually look like, Like I read so many books. Like that was the most amount of books I ever read that year because I got to take some time off. But it's actually really funny from the optimizer standpoint of me. I told you I set aside $20,000. I was spending about 40. I was a 40 a year. I was assuming I was going to take 6 months off. I set aside 20 and I thought I was going to blow through all of that. And then I had a couple of like backup options in terms of like turning off my dividend reinvestment on my brokerage account to take that, pulling out, making some interest off my high yield savings account. The funny thing was though, I ended up making money during that time off because like opportunities would show up that only like a unemployed person could really take advantage of. Like I sat in the audience of Brené Brown and listened to her talk because they had to fill out the audience, and I got paid to sit in that. And then another example is my girlfriend's mom lost an employee at her company and they needed some like clerical help and some help with some other side projects. And I'm like, I can give you like a couple hours a day. Like I have nothing else going on. And then I also took my mini retirement in 2020. We all know what happened that year. It was January 2020. I had this like whole calendar of things filled out, especially in April. So I set aside like another amount of money, assuming I was going to blow that through some travel. And I ended up like spending about $13,000 over 7 months, assuming I was going to spend 20 over 6. And I ended up making like $17,000 during that period. So I like came out ahead. And I think a lot of people that are pursuing financial independence forget that they are probably not going to put zeros up on the income category every single year because they're going to pursue things that are going to produce income, or they're going to end up finding other ways where they can reduce their expenses because they don't have to take an expensive Sunday night flight. They can take a random Tuesday night flight because they have the time and the flexibility to do that now. It's
crazy and very woo-woo, but I find like the less I work, the more money I make. You have to put in like a certain level of work, and like it helps when you did a lot of work in the past, right? And you can kind of, there's compounding returns there. But there is something about like especially when you have a plan, right? Like you didn't go into it with $0. You went into it with $20,000. You had a spreadsheet. You were like, okay, I think I can make this work for 6 months. And then you end up actually earning money during that time because you have the flexibility. And so I find that with a lot of retirees, especially millionaire retirees or military service members who, have the knowledge and the capability to save and invest, they always plan for the absolute worst case scenario. I'm not going to earn a single dollar. And Social Security is going to blow up. And my healthcare costs are going to be $250,000 a year. And it's just like, look, if you aren't able to make it work, no one is going to be able to make it work. And there are so many millions of Americans who make it work on so much less. You're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. That's kind of why, and Jamie, I know you're kind of talking about the optimizer in me, and I did kind of pre-mini retirement felt like I could never make some of the decisions or the changes I wanted to until I reached my FI number, because I was in this like great plan and path right now. Then I took this and I recognized like I went in thinking I was got to spend that 20 and my whole plan blew up. And that was only like a 7-month window. Like what's got to happen over this like 15-year window that I have planned here? I know getting the job about 70% of the way done in terms of reaching my financial independence number is probably good enough right now because I'm going to find ways to make income. I still run a business that I'm not going to let go tomorrow. There are so many things that I feel very, very comfortable now having about 70% of quote, quote, the job done that I think I'm probably got to end up further ahead that I really realize. And knowing that, I really wanted to start prioritizing some of the changes and the optionality that I was talking about right now. So it's been a really good change. And as you kind of grow or move through the stages of financial independence, you should really consider letting go of the numbers and the optimization a little bit and free yourself from that and just start investing in some of the other things that life has to offer.
It sounds like you relied on friends and kind of trusted advisors to talk through your scenario and help you realize that optimizing the math wasn't necessarily the top priority at the time. That can be incredibly uncomfortable sometimes to talk about money. And as someone that also talks about money a lot, sometimes for a living, like what are your tips to people who don't have a friend that they feel comfortable talking? Maybe they're the richest one in their friend group. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they came from a lower income family, so they're just embarrassed about having some money now. Like, how do you find the people to talk about, and how do you talk about it in a way that's not tacky?
I mean, I'd love to talk money with my friends more often than I probably do, but it doesn't come up a whole lot. But I have so many friends in this kind of financial independence world, and that's who I kind of rely on. So if I reverse engineer that and like, how do you find this group of friends? like, who are some of your favorite people to follow? Like some of your favorite podcasters or favorite YouTubers or favorite people on Instagram. More than likely, they probably have a community that they've built behind the scenes. So you can easily go and start reading some of the posts or engaging with them and join in some of these like Facebook groups that have a community of people. Start attending things like industry conferences. I went to FinCon. I've met so many amazing people at FinCon, and that's where I'd like met a lot of my money friends, and I would talk to them, and the people that are like 10 years ahead of me would give me this advice of like, Justin, like, you are going to be fine. You're like 27 years old, 52% of the way to your financial independence goal. I promise you, like, you're going to be okay. Take the year off. And like, it didn't sit with me the first time, but as like more and more people told me that, and I'd meet more and more people in this community, like I was more reassured. Go seek out communities. It's great that we have this online world and these niche communities all across. You know, if you're looking for people that are on the path to financial independence, just go to Facebook and look up financial independence groups, join those, and I promise you, you'll find some people.
Just a quick note from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to the show. Hey, Spencer, I've heard about this free Amex Platinum card for military service members. Where can I go to learn more about this?
Great question, Jamie. I've got the Ultimate Military Credit Cards course at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. It's a 100% free email-based course, and I explain exactly how to verify your eligibility for credit card annual fee waivers with the Military Lending Act, or MLA, and the Service Member Civil Relief Act, or SCRA. The Ultimate Military Credit Cards course is a beginner's guide to travel hacking and opening up your first annual fee-waived credit card while you or your spouse serves in the U.S. military. There's no spam, no fluff. The only emails you'll get from me are related to military credit cards. You can unsubscribe at any time, and there's zero cost to you to sign up. You can sign up right now for free at militarymoneymanual.com/UMC3. Again, militarymoneymanual.com/uniform Mike Charlie 3.
And now back to the show. One of the things I've been challenged by that I've mentioned, I think I mentioned on the podcast before, our friend Brian O'Neill, Alf, who's been on the podcast a few times, was like, hey, Jamie, what if you didn't max out your TSP this year and you took your family on a $23,000 vacation? Would that be cool? I was like, yeah, that'd be really cool. But what would it do to my spreadsheet? You know? You sometimes need that outside challenge to like, there's more than the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Jess from the Pioneers on recently. That might be a good companion episode if you want to go check out my show. To this conversation, we talked about the 5 stages of FI, and she challenged me on the very same thing. Don't max out your IRA this year. Like, you're already done. You're 70% of the way there. You look at the numbers, you're going to get there somewhere between 7 and 10 years, depending on how the market does. Like, go spend that money on something that would make you uncomfortable. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. But I finally took that advice, and I just finished up a Switzerland trip. It cost me $6,000. It's probably the most amount of money I've ever spent on a vacation. Hopefully not going to be the most amount of money that I spend on a vacation in the future. But the memory dividends that it provided me, I already know it was so worth it. My girlfriend and I have so many conversations about it already, and I'm so excited. Deploying my money in that way right now is going to make so much more of a difference than me continuing to dump another 6,000 and move my FI timeline up 182 days or whatever it might come out to. I do think that's in a privileged position. I've done a lot of work to get from kind of the 0% to the 70%. And that's what I was talking about. Like, you're going to gain optionality as you move through the process. Like, you don't need to go and drop $6,000 on a Switzerland vacation if you're still trying to get out of credit card debt. Like, there are levels of optionality that come with the progress of financial independence. But as you're getting into the later stages, start challenging yourself to back off of the aggressive pursuits and move into other areas of life.
Morgan Housel talks about moving the goalposts and psychology of money. And it's really interesting because I find myself moving the goalposts as well, right? Like, as I move up the different levels of FI. But I think the important thing is to recognize that you're moving the goalposts and keep the goalposts flexible, right? So that you can always not fixed expenses, right? Like houses, cars, anything that's recurring monthly. Just make sure that it's flexible and you can cut it back if you need to. And as you move the goalposts, just make sure that you're moving them consciously and you're moving them slowly enough that you can either make it up with your income, or you just accept that, okay, I'm pushing my FI date, quote unquote, out a little bit. But if you're making income and you're enjoying your work and you're enjoying your job, then it's okay. Like you can move the goalposts a little bit. And so like, I love that you took that $6,000 Switzerland vacation, and hopefully one day you do something that's 10x that, right?
Yeah.
And like right now that's impossible to think about. But, hopefully with the habits that you built while you've been on your financial independence journey, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about 10,000, 100,000 or a million, it's the same principles, it's the same percentages, and you can focus on the stuff that moves the needle. And it's crazy how like to get from 0% to 70%, I mean, that's an accomplishment, right? That's a huge accomplishment. And that's the fact that you did it you were so aware that you were doing it. So many people just kind of bumble through life. And again, to call out my dad's friends, they get to 63 and they call up their Vanguard advisor and they say, hey, can I retire? And he's like, you're good. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna retire then. And they're like, great, you'll get your 4% a year. And they're like, okay, sweet. Like, could they have done it at 53? Could they have done it at 43? Maybe, maybe not, but they never asked the question. They never thought about it. And what's wrong with doing it from 40 to 45 and then saying, you know what? I've had a great run. I got my kids through high school. They're off to college, and I want to go make some more money because I want to go on some $60,000 Switzerland trips. And so that means I'm going to go back into the workforce. And you can do it, but maybe you do it as a consultant. Maybe you do it part-time. Maybe you do it on your schedule. Maybe you only work 4 days a week. If you have optionality, then take them. Take the option. Use your options.
Yes. And that's what I'm trying to advocate. And honestly, just remind myself that like I talk to so many young FI pursuers, and I know we're going to have tons and tons of time. Well, none of us are guaranteed our life, but if I'm just going to kind of assume normality here, like I got another 50 years ahead of me, and probably only 8 to 10 of those I need to work in any kind of capacity whatsoever. I love the idea that you're presenting here, Spencer, of like, hey, my kids are young right now, and I want to just take the next 5 years off. And if I make a little bit of money during that time, great. If I don't, that's fine too, because I got enough saved up right now. And that's fine because I know, I'm just going to probably work those additional years sometime in my 40s, and then I'm going to work a year or two in my 50s, and I'm probably going to work a year or two in my 60s. But honestly, realistically, what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to continue to just work part-time indefinitely because I like a little bit of my work, but I'm going to continue to scale my work the way I want to scale it. I want to outsource things that don't make sense to me. I'm going to fire clients that I don't like working with. Like I'm creating like a dream career because I have so much optionality and I'm not dependent on the income now, which is an amazing place to be in.
Yeah, if anyone thinks it sounds like un-American or like unethical or anything to not work full-time and not like contribute to capitalism and the American dream, or there's so many things that you can do to contribute to society, like having great children that can then do well in school and solve some problem that we have, or invent something or cure some disease, investing in your community, volunteering. And it doesn't have to be this all or nothing, like I'm never going to work again. It's just that option of having freedom, I think, is one of the most American things you can do, to have the opportunity to be blessed with the opportunity to do that and invest in the country in the way that you want, instead of it being like, this is what I do. I work 9 to 5. I work from 21 to 65. And then I sit in a wheelchair because I'm so unhealthy and all I did was eat McDonald's and work.
America. What's more American than that, Jamie? Who's better positioned to take advantage of this than a military service member? I mean, if you come in and you enlist at 18, you do a 20-year career and you retire at 38, you have inflation-adjusted pension for the rest of your life. You might have tax-free VA disability payments on top of that or in addition to that. And you have your access to healthcare. I mean, you have so much mobility. And I mean, and military service members do this where they're like, great, I'm going to move to Thailand because I can live off of my military pension there. But yeah, I think it's just like, don't go into that government service job because you didn't think about it, because you didn't give yourself options. And even if, this is the crazy thing, right, is even if you haven't saved and invested for financial independence, because you've got that backstop of that military pension and potentially the VA disability payments and TRICARE, you've got the backstop there. So like you're not, I mean, lots of veterans do end up homeless, but if you are smart about it, you shouldn't end up homeless, and you should be able to go pursue and build the life you want. You should be able to go out there and act like you're financially independent. I think that's a great thing that you brought up, Justin, is the mindset. Financial independence is really a mind state. It's really just how do I want to be in the world? What work do I want to be in the world? Essentially, I mean, if you think about like how you were in college or how you were as a kid on like summer break, like you were financially independent, right? Like, yeah, you weren't taking $6,000 trips to Switzerland probably, but you were free to choose and to live your life. And so I guess, so as adults, like so many times we just get stuck in these like ruts and we think we're not free, but it's like, you can, it's like the Matrix, right? It's like free your mind. Like you can be free whenever you want to be. So Justin, some great discussion on mindset, financial independence, some super high level stuff, but I want to just wrap it back to mini retirements, some nitty gritty. What kind of questions do you get from people? As someone who has been on a bit of a mini retirement for the last 3 years, I know that one of my greatest fears going into it was I'm going to waste time. So how did you avoid, making sure that like you didn't just eat Doritos and sit on the couch all day?
I think this is actually a really good thing to think about before you set sail on your mini retirement, because I do think, especially people that are coming into mini retirements being burnt out, like you could very easily fall into the trap of, I'm going to take 3 months off and I'm burnt out. And all of a sudden you find yourself at the end of that 3 months, the only thing you've done is binge watch 14 Netflix TV shows, and you weren't actually impressed or enthused with how you spent your time. And I think this is a bad trap. Thinking through and setting an intentionality for your mini retirement is important. And especially if you're in the burnout stage, you should just take the first 2 weeks and not put any pressure on yourself, like recoup, rest, do some healing activities like going for walks or having lunch with friends. But then you can kind of get into the intentionality that you've set for that. And for me personally, once again, that was kind of investing in a hobby that I've always wanted to do, but never had time to do it because of work, which was podcasting. So that I knew was going to be a major focus of my mini retirement. So I set aside Monday through Friday. I knew I would spend 2 hours a week on my podcast. And that really gave me a base or some routine for my weeks during my mini retirement. And then on top of that, I got back into running, and I really wanted to focus on my health and wellness again. So I'd go for a morning run, and then I'd sit on the porch, I would read, then I'd spend the 2 hours working on my podcast, and then I would get done with that. Sometimes it'd be like 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And once again, my hard-charging, hard-working Midwest boy was like, man, I need to knock out another 2 or 3 hours of work right now. But you got to give yourself some grace, recognize that you're taking this mini retirement to also recoup and recover. After you've finished the 2 or 3 important things that you knew you were going to do that day, go and spend the rest of the day exploring, being creative, recouping, resting, spending time with loved ones, etc.
How did you describe it to people? Like, I'm picturing my late grandparents and like, hey, I'm going to take a mini retirement. And they're like, what do you mean? Get back to work.
Oh, this is a tough one too. I anticipated some. I assumed my dad would absolutely hate this idea, and he hated this idea. Just like, okay, you're going to be a useless member of society. What do you got to do for healthcare? All of these things. So I did strategically think through a couple of those specific questions that I knew he was going to ask me. Like, I researched healthcare options, and I got a healthcare option before I even went to him with this. I told him, leading up to the mini retirement, this is how much money I've set aside. This is what's going to happen if I'm running out of money. This is kind of my fallback plan if anything happens. So kind of reassuring him on that front. But just for the wider group of people, I told people that I was taking some time off of work and exploring interest and hobbies outside of work because I want to spend some time to do that. And it was weird for some people, but most people were like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then we'd move on and continue to have a normal conversation after that.
Jamie, I get similar questions when people ask me what I do. And, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm a podcaster, I'm an author, I'm a financial coach or mentor. And they're like, oh, that's full time? Yep, full time enough. So,
yeah, I don't think you have to like over justify in any certain way. And I think you might have you might have 3 different scripts for a different kind of people. Like, if you're out and you're at a party and you're meeting someone for the first time and they're just, what do you do for work? That might be a certain conversation versus a friend that you're catching up with that hasn't seen you for 6 months and they ask you what you've been up to. Like, those conversations might feel or sound a little bit different, but you don't, once again, have to over justify why you're doing this. If you're sure that this is the right thing for you to do right now, then that's the only thing that's really important about this.
Well, I hope that we maybe sparked some interest in one person. Justin, if there was like one thing about mini retirement and the mindset stuff for financial independence that we talked about. What's one big takeaway that you want to make sure the listener gets?
I think I just want to come back to optionality and showcasing that you have more options than you think. Even if you're 0% on your path to financial independence, there are many times where people are in jobs that they hate, and there are ways that you can build your way out of that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to race to financial independence. It could mean that you need to start working on skill sets outside of your career, or that you need to start networking, or you need to go to your boss and have a list of the tasks and responsibilities you really enjoy and some things that are really draining you. Like, you have to take ownership in your life right now and recognize that you're creating it and you have optionality and you only have this one life. Like, you only have a certain amount of time here. So like, make the best of it.
Don't wait till financial independence to live your best life, because I know far too many people who work until they're 65 and drop dead at 66 or even at 65. And it's just like, I hope you did everything that you wanted to do in those 65 years. And some of them do. And I don't know, some of them, I don't think they do. So you can't live every day like it's your last, but you should probably live some of them.
And there's so much enjoyment in life that doesn't involve money too. So even if like you are in kind of the accumulation stage and you can't afford things, like, go have fun as well. Like, the amount of like fun that I figured out how to do for free whenever I was in the early accumulation stages was ridiculous. And I kind of wish I still had that energy to go out and find some of those activities too. Like, just like going to the park with a soccer ball and then putting together a pickup group. Like, those are some of my favorite memories, and it cost me $0. So I think you can have a really fun and exciting life and achieve financial independence at the same time.
Love that. Love that. Justin, thanks so much for joining us. Where can people find you if they're interested in other things you have to say?
I have a podcast called FI Minded or Fi Minded. It's on any podcast player, whatever you're listening to right now. If you want to start, we actually had Spencer Reese on the show. That was episode 171. We talked about gifting and donations. Also, if you want to kind of have a companion episode to this topic that we were talking about, the one right before that, episode 170, we had Jess from the Pioneers, and we talked about how to live a FI life without a FI bank account. So that might be a really interesting conversation if you want to go out and check out a first conversation on the show.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Military Money Manual podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
The views and opinions presented here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of the DoD or its components. Reference to any commercial products or services does not constitute DoD endorsement of those products or services.